Welcome back to PRN Test Drive. I'm James, and this is the 2025 Mercedes EQB 300 4MATIC. Now, it's been a very interesting week with the Mercedes EQB, as well, it's my first time ever getting behind the wheel of one, and it's just one of those vehicles that I can't quite put my finger on the market for it. Because the thought I keep coming back to all week is that this is a decent SUV, but not a great EV. We're gonna unpack all of that and much more in this video. I'm gonna talk to you about the exterior, gonna hop in the interior, talk to you about the specs and everything in between. We're also gonna go on a test drive and we'll see if you should spend your money on a 2025 Mercedes EQB. Let's get right into it. So since I'm already standing on the outside freezing, let's talk about the exterior. If you look at the EQB from the front end, we have that classic Mercedes EV front design where there's not much of a front grille design. It's kind of like a flat pattern with the little Mercedes stars in between. And of course, we've got that classic big Mercedes logo right up front. I have parking sensors, but no front-facing camera, as this vehicle does not come with a 360-degree view. I don't feel like you need it. As you can see, it's a very small and compact vehicle, so a 360-degree camera is not necessary in this case. I do like the daytime running LEDs. I find them very nice. I actually do not hate the front end at all. I quite enjoy the design of it. I know some people don't really like the flat, the kind of rounded out edges, but I prefer it actually, because if you're gonna market an EV, make it look like an EV. And I think Mercedes has done a good job. Now, there's no front trunk at all. So if you open the hood, you're just gonna see the battery components. I'll talk to you about what is actually powering that in just a second here. If you look at the EQB from the side profile, you'll see that I have the aero wheels. So that's the standard wheels that this thing comes from. I don't really mind it. Again, kind of adds to the EV look, so that's okay with me. I do enjoy the chrome on the door handles and the turn signal LEDs. It still looks pretty nice. From the side profile, it looks a bit like a longer, flatter Kia Soul, but way more upscaled because, of course, this is a Mercedes. But you'll see that the ride height is very low, and when you're driving this thing, you don't necessarily feel like you're driving an SUV. I more feel like I'm driving a regular Mercedes sedan. Taking a look at it from the back, you have that nice little light bar for the tail lights. We also have our badges, the 300 and the 4MATIC, which means all-wheel drive is included here. The trunk is, of course, automatic open and close, which is very nice. And when you look in the inside of the trunk, you'll notice there is a surprising amount of room for the size of the vehicle that we're looking at. I thought it would be a situation where I would be trading off, maybe a little bit of rear seat space for trunk space, but I'm happy to report that I have ample room in both areas. Like this is a very impressive, vehicle in terms of space. And that's, again, back to my point where I say this is a very decent SUV. Now, let's hop in. I'm gonna give you the specs. We'll talk a little bit about why this maybe isn't such a great EV. Let's hop inside. All right, so now that I'm nice and warm inside the EQB, let's talk about what's actually powering this thing. We have a 70.5 kilowatt hour battery giving us 359 kilometers of range on a full charge. But I'll tell you right now, I have not really seen close to that currently. For example, I'm sitting at 60% state of charge. I've got 144 km with an absolute max range of 190 kilometers. So when I'm at 100%, I see close to like 303, 305. I've seen that number a couple times. So that's the range I'm working with, which by today's standards just isn't that much. It would honestly give me quite a lot of range anxiety to even attempt a road trip with the EQB. I feel like I would have to, in the current state of things. Obviously, we do have, colder weather. I've been driving at -20, -28, nearly minus like 31 one of the days. So obviously that is affecting the battery. Battery doesn't like to be cold, but still, I just feel like it's on the lower end in terms of range, even if you could get what Mercedes are quoting it at. I just feel like there's other competition out there that are giving a lot more range for less money, and you get more range. So that's always a good thing. I feel like if I were to take this thing to Toronto, I'd have to probably stop and charge like 6 or 7 times just to be safe. And that's not really something that you want to do, if you're on a road trip. So that is its weakest point, is its range. And that's why I tell you that, look, we're going to go through this and you're going to see that it's a really good SUV or a decent SUV. But when it comes to its EV and what it needs to do, it just doesn't keep up with the rest of the market. But we also get dual synchronous electric motors with a 160 kilowatt output. So of course we do have all-wheel drive, which is always nice. This EQB produces 255 horsepower, 288 pound-feet of torque. And we'll quickly talk about charging. This thing could charge up to 100 kilowatts, so that's perfectly easy to find in my area. That's actually probably the only chargers available in my area, about 100 to 150 kilowatts. And you're gonna go from 10 to 80% in 30 minutes, which is competitive with the rest. But again, we've got a smaller battery pack on board, so that kind of lines up. So yeah, you're gonna sit at the charger for less time, but you're not gonna have as much range as the others. So now we're sitting in the back seat for the Mercedes EQB, and this is one of the areas that it really impressed me the most because I expected, like I said, to have less legroom. That couldn't be further from the case. I'm sitting behind my driver profile. I tend to sit, again, a little bit further back on the left side of the vehicle. I do sit kind of back into the back seat just a little bit, but still I've got room. These seats can also move forwards and backwards, so I've got them fully in the back. So say you did need a little bit of extra trunk space or something, you could actually move the second row here a little bit forward and have more space. And I believe you can even option this thing with somehow a third row. I don't have it, and I don't even know how you would fit it in here, but this is the optimal configuration for it. I've also got a ton of headroom as well. My knee space is perfect. My foot space is perfect. The seats are pretty comfortable. Nothing to complain about, nothing to brag about either. They're your standard rear seat, but I could do a road trip if I had enough range to do so. I could definitely do a road trip back here as a fully grown adult and be quite comfortable. I've also got two vents. I've got two USB-C ports as well, which is very good to have. The baby seat, as you can see a little bit in the shot, fits very well. The tie-down points are easy to access. My daughter doesn't mind it. She likes to look out of the window. The windows are also slightly tinted so the sun isn't in her face. I've also got a really nice sunroof right here. It's kind of that dual pane setup. I really do enjoy it. This is pretty good in terms of rear seats. But enough about the rear. Let's take a look at the business end. Let's hop up front. All right, so in the business end, the front seat, let's talk about what's going on here. So when you start, you're greeted with a pretty nice looking steering wheel. Maybe there's some people out there that don't like the steering wheel, but I don't actually hate the design of it. Of course, you do have like these, haptic feedback buttons, a lot of touch buttons, but it does allow me to control both the gauge cluster and the touchscreen without actually having to remove my hands from the steering wheel, which I think is very convenient. On the right-hand side of the steering wheel, you're gonna be able to control your infotainment display, which is very nice. And you're also gonna have your volume control, phone control, stuff like that. Left-hand side, you will have your cruise control and the ability to control your gauge cluster. So no complaints there. All the way on the door, you'll see we've got like this nice little blacked wood trim. You can see I've got a lot of black here in the interior. That I will say, there is a ton of just black and silver, which, if you're a fan of that, then you're gonna like it a lot. But I like that we have the door controls or the seating controls here on the door. I've got 3 sets of memory settings, which is very good to have. I've also got a heated seat. In this price point, that would have been nice to see, as we don't have them in the back, which is unfortunate to not have if you're paying almost $70,000 for a vehicle. But to the left of the steering wheel, I've also got my illumination controls, and there's a little button on the steering column to either turn off or on my heated steering button. I actually missed it for like the first 2 days, and then I was actually filming B-roll, and I noticed it right there. So check on your EQB, you do have a heated steering button, which is very cool. Next, we'll talk about our digital gauge cluster. It's the same one that you're used to seeing by now on a lot of the modern Mercedes. It's got a couple of different themes. You can go through your efficiency. You can have like a map pulled up. It's very easy to understand. That's also where it's going to show me my range. I have this thing where it says 145 kilometers and then max kilometers. So I guess if I turn things off and, drive efficiently, I could squeeze, 190 kilometers out of this thing. And again, I'm at 60%. It's kind of a weird thing to experience, to have that low at 60%. We also have a decently sized digital infotainment display. It's got wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, all that stuff built in. It's the standard MBUX, and then you could also access your EQ screen where it's going to show you your consumption, your range. You can open your socket flap from here as well. You can set your departure times, charging times, climate control stuff. You can set it all from there should you need to. I've also got ambient lighting in here, so I can change the settings for that. I've got seat kinetics. I can use that there as well. There's no really big performance screens or anything like that. You can see where the energy flow is coming from, and you can kind of see different things like the accelerator and brake pressure for the vehicle when you're driving, if you're into that. But honestly, most people buying this thing are not going to be into that, but it's easy enough to use. You've got a couple of physical buttons for climate control. There's not a lot of stuff going on climate control wise. It's, basically I just leave it on auto and I let it do its thing. But the buttons are nice and laid out. It's dual zone automatic climate control, but we do have vents in the rear, so that's a nice touch. I do like these classic circular Mercedes vents. I always do when I'm in here in any Mercedes. I like the touch. It just screams Mercedes. I never will hate on it. I do kind of like the wood, open wood on the dash too. It does kind of split up the, quite a bit of black that's here. I've got a wireless charging pad, a normal USB-C port, 2 cup holders, the dynamic button, which will give me my options to change between comfort, eco mode, sport mode, or individual mode for the drive modes. We'll talk about those when we actually do take it on the road here. I've got a camera button because this does have the automatic parking assist. And of course, it'll pull up the rear camera. A little bit of like a, storage here. And then we've got storage in the center console as well with 2 USB-C ports. Now, last but not least, I'll talk about the seats. The seats are just black. There's nothing going on in terms of trim or stitching or anything like that, but they are relatively comfortable. They're definitely not seats that I'd want to spend, say, like a 3-hour road trip on because, they are a little bit more on the firm side of things, more firmer than I would enjoy from something like a Mercedes, especially this not being like an AMG or a sport-oriented version of Mercedes. I just feel like there should be a little bit more cushioning to these seats that I just couldn't find during my week with the car. But for your daily mall crawling here and back to work, I've been pretty comfortable. But that's going to do it for my thoughts on the interior and the interior tour overall for the EQB. Let's get this thing out on the road and we'll talk about its performance a little bit more and we'll actually see how it drives. All right, so on the road now with the 2025 Mercedes EQB. Fully EV SUV, but yeah, so just driving it is a very easy experience. It's an excellent mall crawler. It's an excellent little daily commuter, provided that the malls you're crawling in are not too far away from where you live, or they have a charger there, and then you're fine, no problem. And again, same thing with the work commute. If your work is not very far, and you're probably going to be fine. That's one of the things I've been struggling with is finding who exactly buys this car. And the only thing that I can come up with is you're kind of somebody like me where, a lot of the places that you go and you run your errands are quite close to your home. Your work is close to your home. I'm within 15 minutes. And also my work does have chargers available so that I can charge it up during the day for, not that much money. That is where it is. And then of course you want the Mercedes look, you want the Mercedes logo, and you've got the budget to actually pay, close to $70,000 for this thing. And that I feel like is a very niche market, yet I still see quite a few of these vehicles around, which kind of tells me that maybe they're, going for a little bit less than sticker just so that Mercedes can get rid of them. I think I've seen a couple of the used ones in the 49,000 range, so I don't think they're all that expensive on the aftermarket. So that's good news. If you want to pick one up a little bit used, a couple years old, no problem there. So let's throw it into sport mode where everything's on full, and let's give it some beams here. Yeah, so pickup is not terrible at all. I mean, you're definitely not going to have any trouble getting onto the highway. That instant torque feeling is still very much there. You don't go very fast. That's one thing. I mean, you don't really get anywhere very fast, but it still is nice to have. I mean, I think I'd beat I'll beat your average Toyota Corolla off the line if that's still something you're interested in doing, driving this thing. You're going to be able to do it. That's absolutely no worries. It's still kind of got that instant, boom, see, I can push it right there and I'll just blast off. But I feel like I use a ton of range when I do that, of just range that I simply don't have. So it's one of those things, right? The ride quality has been nice too, not too bumpy, not too firm, right in that happy medium. It's it feels like any standard SUV would. I'm not, I really don't have anything to complain about in that wise. Handling wise, it's okay. It's a little floaty, as what I mean by that is I have to put in more steering input when I'm really taking a sharp corner. So if I add a little bit of speed to a sharp corner, I really have to steer a lot more than I think I should, because the center of gravity does still feel quite low in this vehicle, but I still feel like, yeah, you're definitely not getting a connected experience when it comes to the EQB. But again, most drivers and owners of an EQB are not looking for that experience anyways. You're looking for something that's, comfortable and got a good amount of space, in which that case the EQB does. Visibility wise, we are also sitting very nice. Like I said, it does not feel like I'm driving an SUV. Right now I'm driving behind a Honda Civic. I feel like I'm sitting at exactly the same level he is. The only difference is I've got SUV levels of space. He's got sedan levels of space, which I guess that's cool if that's what you want. Personally, when I step into an SUV, I like the feeling of being slightly higher than, you know, your average sedan, so it kind of feels weird when I'm sitting in this EQB. I also do have sort of like quite a bit of good regenerative braking where you can kind of set it. I've got paddle shifters right behind the steering wheel, which actually do feel quite nice to operate. They've got like a really nice click to them. They are plastic, but they still have a very nice click to them. And I feel like it's quite a high quality switch, if you will. I usually just drive on the strong recuperation. It does regenerate a little bit when I'm, you know, letting off. It'll coast a little bit as well, which is nice. And I feel like I'm giving as much battery as I can deal with, because I just feel like the maximum recuperation when I let my foot off the accelerator, it just jerks me around too much, and I just couldn't get used to it, and it gave me quite a bit of headaches, so I didn't like it. But the one that the vehicle starts on, the strong recuperation, is completely fine for my liking here. So I guess the big question is, when it comes to the EQB, is would I buy it given, you know, all of its shortcomings range-wise? And the answer is unfortunately no. I just couldn't do it because there are times where I have to drive a little bit further and I don't necessarily want to worry about charging. Now that's something that comes with owning an EV, sure. But most EVs can kind of go, you know, a considerable distance and come back without really making you worry about range. Currently now, I've been using the car a little bit. I'm at 55%. I've only got 133 kilometers. That's not that much range if you think about it. And if you think about the battery is at 55%. Kind of scary. And it's unfortunate too, because if this was like a hybrid, a mild hybrid, or even a plug-in hybrid, I feel like that's what the EQB should have been, because that way you have your gas, so you have your efficiency with your electric range. They could keep it, the styling the exact same way. We don't even have a front trunk now as it is, so like they could just, you know, maybe, you know, add one battery for the rear motor, and then you have your plug-in hybrid. You have your range, you know, I can just use gas. If I run out of electricity, I'm still fine. I can still take this on long drives. I don't really have to stay in my little area with it. And I think that's what it should have been, instead of being a full EV, because we just simply don't have enough range, or at least in my opinion, if I was to look at this from what I actually spend, close to 70 grand on the vehicle, what I actually put the money down, I just couldn't do it. The range is just too much of a deal breaker. And it's a shame, because like I've been saying this whole video, it's got a good amount of room. It does SUV stuff very effortlessly, and it's, you know, a decent looking Mercedes. I mean, it's definitely probably last on the list of Mercedes that I would choose out of all the Mercedes I've been able to review in my time. And I'm still seeing a couple of the EQBs. I don't know if they're 2025s, but there's a bunch out on the road, and I see them almost everywhere. I do see them quite frequently at chargers, so that maybe does say something, but still, I see them. So I think the community, there's still a community. I think people are still able to enjoy this vehicle. They just have to make compromises. You just have to make it work. It's gotta work for you. And if it does, more power to you. This is gonna do it for my thoughts on the 2025 Mercedes EQB. But of course, I wanna hear from you. If you're an owner, you know, how do you feel about the range of the EQB? Are you a potential owner? Are you looking at an EQB? You know, what's going on with that? Also, if you do own one, or if you've used one long term, let me know reliability wise, because that's unfortunately something I cannot speak to. Got it for a week, and for a week it usually works flawlessly. And if you're not considering the EQB, let me know why it's something else. I really want to know why people would not buy this car, just as much as why you might be looking at one. With that being said, make sure you like, subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this one. I'll see you in the next week. See you in the next car. Take care.